Shawn, let me ask you first, do we really need yet another bureaucratic agency to look at this problem that's already got enough, or at least a lot of bureaucratic agencies looking at it?
Yeah, I think if you put another layer into this area, you're creating some problems. If this is done as it was described today, specifically as a coordination of intelligence, I think there's some value there. But quite frankly, there are multiple centers now where there's a lot of coordination happening across the entire U.S. intelligence community. So really, the facts are in the details, and the real key here is to see exactly how this is to be utilized, what the White House's goal is.
Michael Leiter, there was, as the story was described at least, the president wanted to know over Thanksgiving what was happening at Sony, and nobody could tell him, and that there was no central place to get that information. Is that a real problem, Michael?
I think it is, and people are right to be dubious about the creation of a new layer or a new organization in Washington to solve the broader cyber problem. It won't. But I disagree a little bit with my friend Shawn in that often when you have the most organizations in government looking at a problem, you actually do need that coordinating agency. So I think that this center should not be viewed as a panacea, which is going to solve all the problems. But there is a need for a common belly button to know what the NSA is seeing, what DHS is seeing, and what FBI are seeing. So that information can then be conveyed effectively back out to the private sector and the rest of the U.S. government.
Well, Michael, why not require companies to disclose when they've been hacked? I mean, wouldn't that, by law, require them, if customer data of a certain level has been, taken, copied, hacked, the companies are required, wouldn't that kind of shining sunlight on it just force those companies to do a little bit more and to raise their game when they're fighting against hackers?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Most of the cyber problem, in my view, is not going to be solved by the government. It's going to be solved by the private sector. And the private sector, as it has been, will have to continue to invest in technology, in training, in information sharing within the private sector. And that could include public disclosure and disclosure to the government. This piece is much smaller. It's really trying to make sure that the U.S. government is on the same page so it can intelligently interact with the private sector. I do think disclosure within the bounds of how industry is already seriously regulated on this front is appropriate, but corporations also then need protection from the government so they don't face additional liability for those disclosures.
I think their customers would probably hold them to that high standard once they had to disclose it. Shawn, there is a compelling argument, it seems to me, when the president says he didn't have the information that he wanted to have on that Thanksgiving day. At least that's the story that the White House is telling. Does that approach within the White House, is that the right place to do it, and wouldn't that work?
Well, I do agree with Mike. I don't think we disagree in this area. My concern is what we call another agency if that agency is expected to conduct operations. There are lots of organizations that conduct operations, and if this is solely about collecting intelligence to provide visibility in one single point, I absolutely concur with that. In terms of the White House not being able to get that information, I find that hard to believe. I know that we worked at the NCI JTF when I was at the FBI. We had FBI, NSA, CIA, DHS, DOD. The entire U.S. government that's involved in cyber, all sitting in one center together working on the same problem. So certainly the minds are there. It's a matter of trying to coordinate and bring this intelligence to a logical conclusion so that our decision makers and leaders can make the appropriate moves.
I also wonder about the relationship, Shawn, with business and with the companies whose information is getting out there. Are there relationships like that right now with the CIOs of the companies that are gathering this data, companies like Anthem, companies who knew, like Sony? I mean, does the White House have the best relationships there? Does anyone in government have those relationships?
That is really the ideal, what I call intelligence sharing, not just information sharing, but tactical intelligence. The U.S. government is collecting a whole host of data that would be of incredible value to the private sector if it was able to get into the hands of the CIOs that are responsible for protecting these companies. Oftentimes that doesn't happen because the intelligence is collected in a classified format. I think that's one of the goals, and I think when the president speaks on Friday, that'll be one of the things he suggests, that there's better intelligence sharing. I think that the classification level needs to come down so that companies are in a much stronger position to identify who the adversaries are and to detect them on their network. Mike Leiter just said it. They've got to develop better technology that allows detection on the networks so companies can better protect themselves.
Yeah, Mike, the president is coming to Silicon Valley on Friday. We will be there with Bloomberg West. It's a little bit of a forward promote for us. But, Mike, I wonder, you know, the companies in Silicon Valley have a very difficult relationship when it comes to privacy and data with this president, with what's happened with the NSA, with the last president for that matter as well. What does he have to say in his messaging to those companies here in Silicon Valley?
Well, you're absolutely right. There has been a very strained experience between those companies and the government, especially after the Snowden disclosures. And I think that relationship has to be rebuilt. It has to be rebuilt for the companies, for them to have success internationally outside the United States in their business. And it has to be rebuilt for the United States because the U.S. government will continue to rely on the private sector for lots of people and technology that the U.S. government also has to use. So this is a possibility and an opening to rebuild that trust. And we have to accept that there is no silver bullet to solving the cyber problem. We have put all of our wealth, all of our information on networks, and many of those networks are vulnerable. So this is going to be a combined effort, the U.S. government, the U.S. private sector, and individuals, and it's going to be a long path.